Good evening and welcome. My temple destroyed. Can God destroy the holiest place on earth? Let's look into deeper meaning, into the reason and purpose of destruction. Tonight we will discuss, how can God destroy the holy temple? Is good found within bad? And we will conclude by answering a phenomenal and tremendous question that arises when learning Maimonides. This is an interactive class, and I ask you to please feel free to ask any question you would like in the chat, and at different points throughout the class, we'll try and answer all the questions. Additionally, right on top of the screen that you're looking at right now, there should be a link with which you could print out the handout for tonight's class, which will have the different sources that we will be using. The Midrash, and similarly the Talmud, share with us that there was a Jew plowing his field, 2 cows attached to a plow. And all of a sudden, one of them made a sound, and an Arab neighbor passing by turns to the Jew and says, "Detach the plow from the cow and remove the yokes from on top of them, as your holy temple has been destroyed." A moment later, the cow makes another sound. And again the man turns to the Jew and says, Jewish man, return the yoke onto cows and attach back the plow. As Mashiach, the man who will redeem the Jewish people, has just been born. The Jewish man turns to the fellow and says, what's the name of Mashiach? Menachem. What is his father's name, he asks. Chizkiah. Menachem ben Chizkiah. Where exactly was he born? In which city? And the man lists the city name. The Jew had tremendous faith in the words of his neighbor, and he sold his possessions and became a peddler, selling children's needs, children's toys, children's blankets. And he went from town to town, city to city. He would go into a city, set up his wares, sell them, then continue on to the next city. And he finally reached the city mentioned where Mashiach was born. And he arrives, he sets up his wares, and all the women come to buy the necessities for their children. And he listens into a conversation. There's a group of women talking to one particular lady and saying, "Mother of Menachem, why don't you buy any items for your child? Don't you need items for your child? Every child needs diapers, needs wipes, needs blankets. Why are you not buying anything?" And she shares. She says, "If I could, I would strangle my son." What? Why would you do such a thing? She says, "My son was born in the worst possible time ever. At the time the holy temple was being destroyed." This peddler is listening into the conversation. He's fascinated. He's been looking for this woman. And he turns to her and he says, "1 second, your child was born when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, then he will certainly be the one to announce and bring back its ultimate building." And he turns to the woman and he says, "Why are you not buying anything?" She says, "I don't have a penny to my name. I don't have a pruta, the smallest currency. I don't have a penny." The man says, "No problem. Take the wares you need. Take whatever you need. If you need 2 packs of diapers, wipes, no problem, take them. I'm going to go from town to town and I'll be back in a few weeks and I'll come back then and you'll pay me." And so it happens. He gives her the items. He goes from town to town and returns in a few weeks. And he goes to her and he says, "No, how's Menachem ben Chizkiah?" Since the day I spoke to you, she says, I have not seen him again. Tremendous, scary wind came, took my child, lifted him up, and took him away, and he's never been seen from since then. Fascinating story. Interesting. But what's the purpose of this story? Why would the Midrash, why would the Talmud tell us such a story? What's the lesson? What's the message we're supposed to take out? I'd like to share with you another quote, a very cryptic quote, very hard to understand. It's a quote from the Yalkut Shimoini, and the quote is text number 1 on your handout. Let's read it together. The lion came under the constellation of the lion and destroyed the lion of God, in order that the lion shall come under the constellation of the lion and build the lion of God. The lion came in the constellation of lion to destroy the lion, in order that the lion should come in the constellation of the lion and rebuild the lion. What? Very cryptic. What are you trying to say? What's the message here? The meaning of the words, the commentary is very clear. That Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylonia, came and destroyed the holy temple in the 5th month, in order that Mashiach should come in the 5th month and rebuild the temple. So Nebuchadnezzar came in the 5th month to destroy the Beis HaMikdash, in order that Mashiach should come in the 5th month and rebuild the temple. If that's the message that we're supposed to be told, so say that clearly. Say that Nebuchadnezzar came in the 5th month. What's this cryptic wording? The lion came under the constellation of the lion to destroy the lion, in order that... Say it clearly. What are you trying to tell me? What is the message hidden behind the words? And why are we constantly using the same quote, the lion? The Rebbe got thousands of letters, tens of thousands of letters. I don't know, maybe even hundreds of thousands of letters. And yet, very often, when he would respond to a letter, instead of responding on his own letterhead and sending that back to the person who had the inquiry, the question, he would actually take the same paper and on that paper write his response. Why? Jewish people don't waste. We don't destroy. If there's no reason for me to use another piece of paper, I'm not going to. Jewish people build. We love one another. Destruction is unheard of. When I was a young student, I learned in the yeshiva Or Elchanan Chabad in Los Angeles, California. At the time, they had a dormitory, and the dormitory was getting old, and they had made a decision. They're going to tear down that dormitory and in its place build a magnificent edifice, a magnificent dorm and yeshiva that is there today. You could go see it. It's beautiful. So the students, we hear this. We hear that the day after yeshiva is going to end, the next day they're going to destroy the dormitory. Well, a few students got together and felt if they're destroying the dormitory the next day, let's help them out. And they literally went ahead and took different items and started banging down walls. What could be wrong? You're anyways destroying it. Let me help you out. And I remember like yesterday, the impression on my mind was tremendous. The Rosh Yeshiva comes, and he calls an emergency meeting, and he tells everyone, he says, we don't destroy. If it needs to be destroyed, people will do that. There's a method. But just to go with bats or hammers, whatever, and destroy for no purpose, just for fun, unheard of. Baal tashchit. do not destroy. So how could God destroy the Holy Temple? If we're not allowed to destroy, how could God destroy the Holy Temple? And let's look, fascinating, what you are allowed to destroy, what you're not allowed to destroy. Maimonides, in the Laws of Kings, 6:10, text number 2, let's look together on the handout. It says, anyone who breaks utensils, tears garments, destroys buildings, or even just stops up a spring. There's a natural spring of water. If you stop it up or ruin food with a destructive intent, you are transgressing the command, do not destroy. We don't tear things. We don't destroy things. We build. We love one another. We're all about building. So how could God destroy the Holy Temple? Well, you'll tell me, since when does God keep the laws? Yes, He set out certain measures that will allow us to become better people. He said, yes, we need to put on tefillin. We have to keep kosher. We have to keep the Shabbos. But God, He's perfect. Why should He keep the laws? A boy, when he turns bar mitzvah, there's a custom that he says the bar mitzvah maimer, a Hasidic discourse. And the Hasidic discourse focuses on the idea of tefillin. And one of the focal points in the maimer is, in the discourse, how God puts on tefillin. Whatever He tells us to do, He does Himself. And God Himself puts on tefillin. Any command He gave us, He does Himself. Let's look inside of text number 4. He tells His words to Jacob, His statutes and His judgments to Israel. His statutes, His judgments, the judgments that God Himself does, we do. We're partners together. A couple once came to the Rebbe and asked the Rebbe, they had a young child, they said, Rebbe, what age do we need to start educating our child? The Rebbe said, the second the child is born. Before he understands, it's not about when you could start talking to him and saying and teaching him the Torah. Education is a living example. If you talk but don't practice what you preach, you're going to have a hard time instilling that in your students and your children. If you want to give over a message to your students, to your children, you have to be a living example. And our example for our commands is God. Whatever God tells us to do, He is an example for us. He does it Himself. So how could God destroy the Holy Temple? Not only is there a problem of destruction in general, but when we talk about the Holy Temple, there's a specific command just about the Holy Temple and about synagogues, about holy places. When the Jewish people were going from Egypt, they were about to cross over the river together with Joshua, Yoshua, and enter into Israel. So Moses is commanding them, Moshe Rabbeinu, and he tells them, text number 3, destroy all the places in which the nations of Canaan served their gods. Tear down their idols. Break their monuments. Burn their Asherah trees and smash their idols. We don't want to have a remnant, a trace of idol worship amongst us. You shall not do the same to the Lord your God. You shall not do the same to destroy places of worship, a synagogue, a Beit Medrash, a study hall, the Holy Temple. All of these places, aside from the issue of Baal Tashchit that you can't destroy, there's a separate command not to destroy a holy place. So what is going on? Our temple was destroyed. How could that be? Who said God was an active participant in the destruction? The king of Babylonia destroyed the temple. Why are we blaming God? It was his decision, the king of Babylonia. He made the choice. God didn't direct him to do it. Can't say that. It's not acceptable. Let's look in Jeremiah. Jeremiah, Yirmiyah 25:9, text number 5 on your paper says clearly, God is talking, behold, I, God, shall dispatch the nations of the north, and Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, my servant, and I shall bring them upon this land and its inhabitants. I, myself, am directing Nebuchadnezzar to you to come and destroy the Holy Temple. So we see clearly that Hashem is taking complete responsibility for the destruction that Nebuchadnezzar accomplished and did. How could that be? Let's make a quick summary of where we're holding until now and take a few questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them at this point. We mentioned the story of the Jew that followed this young and newborn child, Mashiach, from town to town, and how Mashiach was taken away, Menachem ben Chizkiah was taken away by the winds. What's the message of that story? The Midrash seemingly is very cryptic. The lion, in the month of the lion, destroys the lion. What's the message? And now we're asking, how could it be that God destroyed his own temple? The Torah says not to destroy. How could he destroy it? Any questions? Let's give a moment for anyone to feel free to ask a question. Absolutely. If there's any questions, please again feel free to ask them. We'll continue on, and later on we'll answer other questions. If someone sins or someone does something inappropriate, there has to be a consequence. There's no such a thing as a free life. If you did something inappropriate, there's a consequence. There's rewards and there's consequences. So what do you mean, how did God destroy the temple? The Jewish people, as we learned in the previous class, the Holy Temple, the Jewish people, in the times of the first temple, had stooped very low and were responsible for the transgression of idolatry, adultery, and killing, murder. So there had to be a consequence. There was no other choice. What do you mean, how could God destroy the temple? That was a consequence for what had happened. What's the other option? We can't say that's the answer. You know, in Lamentations, that was written by Jeremiah, Yirmiyah, the pasuk tells us, "Tavu ba'aretz she'areha," the gates of the temple of the Beit HaMikdash sunk into the ground. The gates, they weren't burnt, they weren't destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, by the king of Babylonia, no. They sunk into the ground. And similarly, many of the vessels that were in the first temple were actually hidden away and were never destroyed. So if you're telling me the whole reason of the destruction was a consequence, so don't destroy the temple, make it disappear, make it go underground. Just like we can't find today the Holy Ark, the Aron HaKodesh. Similarly, so if God wanted the consequence, then just make the temple go into the ground. Why was there the need to destroy it again? Again, how could the destruction be allowed? We have over here a question. Okay, it's a good question, a very good question about the comparison between Maimonides to Moses. But let's leave it. Maybe at the end of the class, we'll discuss it. I want to more focus on this question. How could God destroy the Holy Temple? Psalms, the Tehillim, was composed by how many people? 10. One person compiled it, King David. He compiled Psalms, but it was actually authored by 10 different people. For example, some of the Psalms were said by Adam, the first person to live. Some of them were said by the son of Noah, Shem. Other Psalms were said by the 3 children of Korah. Of course, we have some Psalms by David, King David. We have some Psalms by King Solomon, King Shlomo. One of the people who authored Psalms was a man who lived during the times of King David, a man named Asaph. He himself was a Kohen, was a Levi. He was a singer. He was actually in charge of the singers and the musicians in the temple of the Levium. And he authored numerous psalms. And yet one of them is beyond my understanding. Psalm 79. Let's look, handout, text number 6. A song of Asaph. Asaph composed the following song. A song is a joyous and happy to the melody. Listen to the happiness that Asaph is celebrating. O God, nations have come into your heritage. They have defiled your holy temple. They have made Jerusalem into heaps. A celebration. I'm singing. Asaph is singing a song. He's so excited. Nations have come in. They've defiled your holy temple, made Jerusalem. What type of a song is this? It should be a cry, a lamentation of Asaph. What? A song? A song that the temple is destroyed? Joyous that Jerusalem is in heaps? Whoa. Asaph, what is this? There was a king who had a son engaged. A son, he got engaged to a particular woman. The king, very proud of his son, the prince, went ahead and built a magnificent edifice, a magnificent home for his child. You can only imagine that home. It's a dream home. And his son, sadly, went off and did a lot of inappropriate actions. The king, in his anger, tore down the edifice, this magnificent palace, this magnificent home he had built for his son. He destroyed it. Onlookers are looking at this, and it's breaking their heart. Of course, the king is upset. He's very disappointed in his son, and they understand what the king is doing. But nonetheless, it's very hard to see. One man was celebrating. The prince had his flute, and he was playing a song, celebrating. And the onlookers turned to the tutor in shock. And the tutor turns to them and he says, "Don't you see what's happening? The anger that the king could have let out on his son, his frustration, his wrath, he's letting out on just this building. I'm celebrating the life of the prince, that he will not be killed. God forbid he's still alive. I'm the release of God's anger, of the anger of the king on just mere physical items." And this is the song that Asaph sang. He said, "God, you have saved the Jewish people. The anger reserved seemingly for the Jewish people you've let out on just physical stones and trees and wood. You've released that anger somewhere else. That's a reason to celebrate. The Jewish people are unharmed." Well, beautiful. Wonderful. We now understand how God destroyed the temple. God's destruction of the temple was actually saving the Jewish people. By allowing his anger in a different area, he wasn't going to let it all out on Jews. Well, then the temple was not destroyed for nothing. There's tremendous reasoning behind the destruction. It's not anymore a problem of Baal Tashchit. No, that's not acceptable. Not acceptable at all. A temple, a synagogue, is not allowed to be destroyed, period. With one exception and one exception only. Text number 7. It is forbidden to demolish a synagogue or any part thereof, even for a most positive and godly purpose, unless the purpose is to rebuild or improve the synagogue itself. That means when it comes to destroying other items, you could destroy a house if there's a purpose to it. But when it comes to destruction of a synagogue or of the Holy Temple, the only permissibility to destroy it is if you're going to rebuild another synagogue or if you're going to rebuild another more beautiful temple in its place. So the fact that God let out his wrath on the temple does not explain to us how we could destroy it. It's still not allowed to destroy it. Destruction of the temple could only be if there's going to be something better in its place. Why? Why, if there's something better in its place, could you destroy it? And here we have a wonderful, wonderful quote from the Mordechai, a commentator on the Talmud. A wonderful quote. He says, text number 8, the demolition is itself an act of building. He says, when you destroy something, in order to rebuild something else, it's not called destruction, it's called rebuilding. The destruction itself is not destruction. The demolition is itself an act of building. Beautiful words. Beautiful words. I'd like to share with you 2 examples. Shimon was running down the street. Simon was running down the street. And he saw the most gruesome and despicable act imaginable. The most forbidden act imaginable. He saw a man take a knife and stab another person. He didn't only stab him, but the man was moving the knife around within the person. Police! Police! Help! Help! What's going on over here? And he grabs the man. He grabs the murderer. The police come. They put on handcuffs. And all of a sudden the man shouts, "What are you doing? How could you put me in handcuffs? I'm in the middle of a life-saving operation. I wasn't stabbing him. I was in the middle of removing a terrible growth inside of him. Quickly, undo the handcuffs. Allow me back. I'm saving. It's a matter of life and death." Whoa. There was a misunderstanding. This man, instead of being a murderer, he's the most righteous man out there. He's saving a person's life. If you save one life, it's as if you saved the entire world. Whoa! This is a holy person. When that man inserted the knife inside of the person he's operating on, the insertion, putting inside the knife, was not an act of destruction. That itself is an act of construction. He's saving the man's life. You know, Mordechai Chernobyler, of course, he lived in the city of Chernobyl, had a chassid, a follower called Beryl. Beryl lived in the city of Chaznik, quite close by to Chernobyl. Beryl hears that Mordechai is going to be coming, his Rebbe will be coming to the city of Chaznik, and he, out of everyone in his town, was most excited. Why? Because whenever the Rebbe would come, he would stay in his house. And he immediately called his family together. He says, family meeting. They sit down and he says, okay. He says, Chaim, you're responsible to go and clean up the house. Malki, you're responsible to set the table. Yitzchak, you're responsible to buy the best food. Everyone has a job. He's getting all ecstatic. when all of a sudden there's a knock at the door. A messenger has a Rebbe. Beryl, the Rebbe asked me to give you the following message. The Rebbe will not be staying in your home. The Rebbe does not want you to appear before him in a private audience, nor are you allowed to come in a public audience. You are not even allowed to come to the Rebbe's table and participate in his Shabbos meal. You should not come to the gathering when he will be coming and being welcomed into the city, and you are not invited into the gathering when he will be leaving your city. Whoa. Beryl is devastated. What did I do wrong? The Rebbe gave one option. If you give him 2,000 rubles. 2,000 rubles! His whole house wasn't worth 2,000 rubles. It's a fortune, 2,000 rubles. And for the first time in his life, Beryl broke down and cried. There's no way he's he doesn't even have close to that if he would sell everything. And that's what happened. He did not get the money, and he did not welcome the Rebbe. He did not go to have a private audience, a public audience, the meal. He didn't escort the Rebbe on his way out. He did not see the Rebbe. And he was tremendously brokenhearted. Beryl always trusted in God, and he thanked God for what he had. He had a beautiful... And he had his needs. Beryl's opinion was, it's not appropriate to ask God for wealth. I have what I need. Why should I ask for more? But for the first time in his life, he turned to God and said, God, please give me the money I need to be able to give to the Rebbe and be able to join my Rebbe. And he would constantly started asking God often, God, please grant me wealth that I be able to join the Rebbe again. A few weeks later, a battalion of incoming army men pass through the town of Chaznik, and they make an announcement. They say, everyone here is going to be putting up a few soldiers. Well, you don't have a choice. Beryl welcomes in a few soldiers, and of course the soldiers bring different items that they're holding with them. In the middle of the night, a bell is rung, and all the soldiers recognize the bell. They realize they're being summoned. They need to go. In the middle of the night, they barely got to sleep. They're very tired. They're all rubbing their eyes, and they run out, and they continue on their journey. 3 days later, a group of soldiers come back searching for something. No one knows what they're searching for, but they're going to different houses searching. A few months later, it was around Pesach time. Maybe Beryl was doing some Pesach cleaning. I'm not sure. But he opens his closet and he sees his chest. He sees his suitcase. He realizes it's months later and he opens it up. And he sees a tremendous fortune inside. Unimaginable. It was the money of the invading army. A fortune. He didn't know which army it was. He wasn't able to return it. It was his. Of course, immediately he takes 2,000 rubles. He runs to the Rebbe. And he puts the money on the Rebbe's table with a brilliant smile. He was able to fulfill the Rebbe's wishes. And the Rebbe looks at him, and he's not shocked for 1 second. And the Rebbe asks what happened. And Beryl shares the whole story. And the Rebbe turns to Beryl and he says, it had been revealed to me that you were destined to become very, very wealthy. But there was a problem. You never asked God for wealth. The wealth was waiting for you in heaven, but they were asking you to pray and ask God for it. I wanted to help you out. I wanted to give you the encouragement you needed. Beryl, the Chernobyl Rebbe concluded, riches can be a severe test. Be careful that you be trustworthy of this present. Let's look in this story for a second. Just like the story before of the man with the dagger that looked like he was killing a man, but yet he was doing a life-saving operation. Similarly here, when Beryl was heartbroken, when he was crying out of pain why the Rebbe is not allowing him in, he thought at the time that was destruction, but it was really construction. That was really the messenger that would allow him to get his real reward, that tremendous wealth. And now, let's look back at the quote, the lion in the month of the lion, destroy the lion, in order that the lion should come in the month of the lion and rebuild the lion. We're constantly using the lion because all details of the destruction and construction are all one person. They're all one entity. They're all God. It's Nebuchadnezzar in the month of destroy the temple in order that Mashiach, no. It's all one person. It's all God. It was all planned in order. The destruction, again, the quote from the Mordechai, the demolition is itself an act of building. The lion destroyed the lion in order that the lion should rebuild the lion. God destroyed the temple in order that he should build a better temple, a bigger temple. The destruction is not destruction, it's construction. And now we can understand the story and why the Talmud relates to us how this man with his plow and Mashiach was born. Because if you remember, when the first sound was made, the Jew was told that the temple has been destroyed. And a second later, when the second sound was made, he was told Mashiach has been born. The second the temple was destroyed, Mashiach was born. It's one thing. The temple being destroyed is a part of Mashiach. They go hand in hand. The message here is tremendous, absolutely tremendous. Destruction has a deep meaning and message. It's all part of a master plan. Could we find good and bad? Of course. There's a message, there's something happening there. If there's any questions at this point, let's take any questions. Let's see, there's a few questions here. Let's look at the questions. Over here we have a comment by Derech. Thank you for asking this question. Could the destruction of the temple have been to direct the Jews' attention to Mount Hebron? Fascinating point, and thank you for pointing that out. What do you think? If you remember, we quoted in text number 3, and similarly in text number 7, that regarding the holy temple, you're only allowed to destroy it if you're going to build a bigger holy temple. Just to bring attention to something else, you cannot destroy the temple or a synagogue. A very good question. I appreciate that. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, we'll give one more moment for maybe a few more questions. You know, as Jewish people, we've always suffered. Suffering is not anything new. Do we have a precedent, an example, where the suffering we experienced was clearly in order to bring an elevation, was clearly for the construction? Of course. Let's take a look at the first exile we ever endured. The exile the Egyptian exile. In text number 9, God says to Abraham, to Avram, you shall surely know that your seed will be strangers in a land that is not theirs. They will enslave them, oppress them for 400 years. But God concludes, and afterwards they will go forth with great possession. With great possessions. Not that we're going into Egypt in order to become rich. Great possessions means physically and spiritually. We'll be able to accomplish and achieve and refine a tremendous amount like never before through the Egyptian exile. So already we see the precedent is the Egyptian exile. That the reason we were in exile, the hardship was not destruction, but of course, as we said earlier, was construction. And now, we're able to answer a question that sticks out in front of your eyes on many major commentators. Commentators as famous as, or leaders as famous as the Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Sadia Gaon, Maimonides, Nachmanides, Rabbeinu Bechaya, the first Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, and numerous other rabbis. There's a tremendous question that sticks out in front of our eyes. The Talmud in text number 10 says, blasted be the bones of those who calculate the end. A Jewish person does not calculate when Mashiach is supposed to come. We all know that the third of the three forefathers, Jacob, he wanted to tell his children when exactly Mashiach, the Messiah, was supposed to come, and God removed the knowledge for him at that time. He did not repeat it over his children. We do not calculate when Mashiach's going to come. That's God's business. And if we do, says the Talmud, blasted be the bones. Well, I don't know. How could you say this? Do you know the Talmud itself, before telling us blasted be the bones, lists numerous authors of the Mishnah itself that gave us dates when Mashiach is supposed to come? Like I said, Maimonides, Nachmanides, Rabbi Sadia Gaon, Rabbeinu Bechaya, the first Chabad Rebbe, they all gave dates when Mashiach is supposed to come. So how does this fit? On the one hand, the Talmud says, if you do, blasted be the bones. On the other hand, we have numerous people that did give dates when Mashiach, the Messiah, is supposed to come. How does this fit together? Why would you want to reveal when Mashiach is supposed to come? Why do you want to know the exact date Mashiach is going to come? Life is about perception. I've once heard the example, life is about the glasses you're wearing. You know, if you have black glasses, then everything you see will be black. If you have green glasses, everything you see will be green. We're affected by the glasses we wear. It may not be physical glasses, it could be mental glasses, spiritual glasses, but we're affected by them. Chaim walks into a room and he sees a terrible and terrifying sight. What would you do if you saw this? He sees there's a woman crying, shrieking, screaming for help. And yet everyone around her doesn't care. There's people surrounding her, and no one is doing nothing. On the other hand, they're all excited. They're all screaming loudly. This woman is shrieking, help me, save me. And she's surrounded by people who don't. You ever saw something so terrible? The man immediately calls security to the room, and security comes, and they turn to the man, they call him aside, they say, Chaim, my young fellow, that woman is in the middle of giving birth. The people around her They're her support just by being there. She doesn't want to talk to them right now. It's actually a time of celebration. There's a new life coming into the world. So a woman surrounded, what did you perceive? Was it destruction? Were they destroying her, or was it construction? Were they supporting her? And now let's talk about why you want to know when Mashiach is going to come. You want to know because it's destruction? Are you sick and tired of the exile? You want to get out of here as soon as possible? You want to have nothing to do with this? You want to destroy the exile? We got a problem. But if your perspective is that you're supporting that woman, you're encouraging her in her birth. If your perspective why you want to know when Mashiach is going to come is because we'll have the ultimate elevation of the exile, we'll have the ultimate euphoria when the Mashiach will come, and we'll be able to see the good that happened. We'll be able to celebrate our accomplishments in exile. Then knowing the date is the most positive thing. It will encourage you to work harder. If you perceive exile as a disaster with no good, then knowing the time of the redemption will do you no good. Blast be the bones. But if you knowing when the exile will end will encourage you to do more, get another chance to put on tefillin with someone, get another chance to encourage a woman to light the candles, get another chance to quickly encourage someone to do a mitzvah. If what you knowing when the Mashiach will come will encourage you, then you need to know when Mashiach will come. And that is why we have numerous people, numerous leaders who told us when he was supposed to come. Because they were telling those people that are going to be encouraged and positively led by that knowledge. So let's summarize what we've discussed, and we'll take any questions. Number one, we're not living in a time of destruction. No. We're living in a time of construction. Fellow friends, yes, we look at what's happening in Israel, and it's hard for us to understand that. Over 50 of our brothers and our sisters have died, have been murdered, standing up for our lives. How do you call that construction? I don't know. But I know it is construction. If we have such a perspective, if we're able to focus and look in the exile, see that there's a tremendous positive happening, and that when the Mashiach comes, we're going to have this edifice, this palace for God, then our knowledge that the Rebbe told us Mashiach is coming now will be the biggest encouragement to allow us to complete our job. I would like to thank JNet and Chabad.org for hosting this class, and fellow friends, fellow participants, please feel free to ask any questions that you would like at this time. It's been a pleasure to have you all, and each and every person should be blessed in anything that they need and want. We have over here a question, why was Maimonides compared to Moshe? Yes, that is a quote, Mi Moshe ve'ad Moshe lo kam ke Moshe, from Moses till Moses, the Maimonides, there was no one alike, no one like Moshe. Maimonides is compared to Moshe. Why? Because just like Moshe gave birth to the Jewish people, similarly Maimonides gave birth. He inspired the Jewish people. At the times of Maimonides, the Jewish people were going through tremendous hardships. If you look in the letters of Maimonides, Igeres Hashma, Igeres Taman, different letters that Maimonides authored, you were able to see that the Jewish people were living at a terribly hard time, and God inspired them, and Maimonides inspired them like Moshe. According to what was seen by King Nebuchadnezzar? Which kingdom are we in? Interesting question. You know, fellow friends, the Jewish people, and Abraham was told this at the time of the covenant between the parts, the Bris Ben Habesarim. The Jewish people are going to go through 4 different types of exile. The Egyptian exile, the Babylonian exile, the Persian exile, and the Roman exile, the exile we're living in right now. It's actually very hard to grasp this, and I was talking today with a friend of mine. The Egyptian exile was 210 years. The Babylonian and Persian exile together were 70 years. And we're currently living in an exile of almost 2,000 years. Very hard to understand. And we need to scream and shout out to God, Ad Mosai, until when will this go on? We need the redemption. We need the Mashiach today. May he come very, very speedily. Any other questions? It's been a pleasure to see you all. Much success and blessing.